All right, we're live. Hello, everyone. My name is Natalia Alamdari. I'm the education reporter here at the News Journal. And today we are joined by Dr. Susan Bunting, Secretary of Education for the state. We're going to be talking about all things back to school, whether it's remote learning, hybrid learning, however your child may be going back. We're going to be talking through all the prep work that's gone in and what parents can expect. So Dr. Bunting, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Yes, great to have you. So to start off, let's think. So many kids are going to be starting off the year remotely. Like majority of districts have opted for that virtual start for the first 6 weeks or so of school. What are some of the things that districts are doing differently now heading into the fall compared to back in the spring to make sure that kids are getting that more rigorous online education?
I think that we have to remember that in the spring, our launch into virtual learning was a very sudden one. We left school on March the 13th with the idea that we'd be back on Monday morning, and that didn't happen. And at first, we were looking at a 2-week hiatus to see how the virus might progress. We then went back with the thought that possibly we would return to school at the middle of May. And that didn't happen either. So we were in new territory. We had very little opportunity to fully prepare for that. We did not even have the opportunity to hand out devices to all of our students before they left because we didn't realize we wouldn't be back. The other thing is that last year we were at the end of a school year. A lot of the learning had occurred by that point, and then we finish out the school year. But now we're looking at a brand new school year. So there's an entire year's worth of new learning that needs to occur for each child, whether that be a third grader who now needs to be able to know and be able to do what is expected with the Delaware content standards as a result of being in third grade, or a senior in high school taking a course that's required for graduation. So we're now into new material with standards-based instruction that has to be done in some form or another. And we want our children to be very successful. So we've done a lot of preparation for this school year. We had the chance in late spring, over the summer, to rethink how this might be done if we were unable to go to school in person after Labor Day or around Labor Day. And a lot of teachers have been participating in training in both formal and informal ways. There have been many opportunities. They've been able to think about how can they accomplish this, whether it's bringing children into the classroom or doing everything remotely, at least for the beginning of the school year. So we've had the time to prepare. We've also had the time to work through the purchase and distribution of devices more thoroughly than we did in the spring. And we've had the opportunity as a state to invest some of our CARES money, the money that came from Congress. So federal money from both the Department of Ed and some that was given to the governor's office have been invested in promoting the internet access that our families need, particularly on the western side of the state. We had many students who were not able to participate in remote learning in the spring because there was no access, there was no internet connectivity. So we have invested a lot of our funds. And let me back up and explain that about $43 million came to the educational system in Delaware through that federal act. Immediately, 10% of it could stay at the department, and the other $39 million went out to districts based on their Title I or their low-income status, their number of students that were qualified for low-income support. So we decided that our money at the department would be invested in increasing the internet accessibility. And we have worked diligently over the summer by adding our funds to what the Department of Technology and Information, DTI as we refer to it, could do. They had a plan to finish building towers, for example, on the western side of the state by December. we knew that that was not going to be any help at all for our school year. So because of our infusion of our funds, those towers were constructed, and that completed date was around the end of July. So we have far more access for our students, and we won't be now hearing that in one of the districts, for example, 30% of the students could not connect to the internet. So we've worked diligently not only to have the towers constructed, but to work with companies that could provide internet to actually connect more homes. And we have invested some of our funds as a state agency in a program that would enable those who might not be able to afford the monthly fee to be helped to make that possible. So the internet accessibility is much, much greater than it was in the spring. And that is another way that we have prepared for the school year, in addition to the purchase of devices by districts and the distribution of those devices and our teacher preparation.
Mm-hmm. When you mentioned the teacher preparation, I'm wondering, like, what are some specific tactics and strategies that you've heard from teachers or superintendents about how they're going to be executing remote learning differently from how it looked in the spring?
Well, first of all, I think the teachers' actual technological skills have been advanced. And then I think there's been a lot of attention paid to the engagement of students as opposed to just delivering things, delivering lessons via internet. How do you truly engage students? How can you determine who's as they would say, who's getting it? And in a classroom, you have that opportunity to look across your set of students, and you can see the sparkle in the eye or the confused look on a face. It's very different when you have to deal with not the immediate interaction with your students. And although some lessons are ones that are, we'll call it face-to-face, the internet is active and you have students in front of you that can respond in certain ways. There are other lessons that are delivered, we call it asynchronous. It's not happening at the same time, so that students can do that lesson at various times in the day. And there's a skill to making sure that the information is being conveyed and also that the students are engaged and are understanding. So we've done a lot to try to build in that connection with the student and the ability to find out what is being received and reacted to. So there have been many efforts to increase our teacher skills. Many of our teachers were excellent content teachers, but they just hadn't had the experience to deliver through a different medium. They're used to being face-to-face. Mm-hmm. So we worked hard on those tactics.
Mm-hmm. For the handful of districts that are doing hybrid learning, even in those districts, kids are still going to have a couple days a week where they're at home learning online. What would you say to parents who have to work outside of the home, who are having issues with childcare or feel like their kids' education might be suffering because they aren't in that physical school building?
I would say work with us, partner with us. We don't expect parents to be as fully qualified as our teachers are. So again, I think that the teachers are working toward doing the bulk of the instructing, but there's a connectivity with parents and the assuredness. If we have an opportunity to make sure the child has a place to learn, a quiet spot, the parent can make sure that the student is engaged at certain times. If you're supposed to be on a Zoom lesson at 9 a.m, there is that concern about parents who work. So we have been diligently connecting with possible daycare or childcare situations, thinking out of the box. We've been working with community groups like Boys and Girls Clubs. I was in a district yesterday where they're actually bringing some of the teachers' children into school and using some of their paraprofessionals, for example, to act as kind of tutors for the students to guide them through their work. But we have also been working with the child care facilities throughout the state to look at how many available spots happen to be there. So we're connecting with that early childhood community as well. And so our districts to try to see if there are some creative arrangements that can be made to assure that that working set of parents or single parent have the opportunity for their children to be well cared for. And remember that much of the remote learning can be done at various times. That's why we call it asynchronous. It's not happening necessarily in that exact time that the teacher would be delivering it in the classroom. So that gives the parent an opportunity, if the children are cared for during the day, to also work in the evenings. And we know that that is an added burden at times, but it's also an opportunity. Not too long ago, someone used the statement that in every challenge, there's opportunity. And so this gives an opportunity for our parents to better connect with what it is the children are learning at school and be a part of that education. Unexpected, but sometimes that's the way opportunities arise.
Talking about childcare facilities, so, the governor has said it's not fully safe for schools to open up, but then, like you said, childcare facilities are taking those school-age children to where it's almost as if classrooms are being recreated outside of schools. Why is it that the state has decided, okay, it's safe for these kids to be in these childcare facilities, but then schools have to stay on a hybrid model? Where's the difference there?
First of all, I want to correct that. The governor said that schools could open. He
a hybrid model though, like not fully.
With precautions.
Mm-hmm.
They are. So it's the creativity in figuring out how do you offer in school instruction. But there also have been precautions put into childcare facilities. Mm-hmm. There are limited numbers that can be in a class. There are other precautions, such as you are in a particular cohort, a small group, and that group must stay intact for the full day. So there has been a need for child care provision from the very beginning of this. And the Division of Public Health has been very forthright in how this can be done. We also know that younger children have much less social communication in general, but they also have not been the ones that seem to be prone to catching the disease and spreading the disease. So throughout the spring and summer, our child care facilities have been in operation, and it has been successfully done with the precautions that need to be there. So much that recently the DPH, the Division of Public Health, has increased that number so that the number of children that are now in daycares, the ones that would be school age, for example, can be in groups of not just 15, but as large as 25. So I think we learn a lot through experimenting, trying, seeing what works, following the directions, and figuring out ingeniously how to do what we need to do with the precautions that have to be taken. And I think that the daycares have shown us that they can successfully do that. And so now that opportunity is there as well for daycares. So schools can open under that hybrid model with a combination, and they have very, very strict precautions that need to be in place, just as the daycare centers do.
Mm-hmm. Kind of related to that. So, in a lot of states, Delaware included, we saw the teachers unions throwing a lot of their power into making sure that teachers did get that virtual start. Like you heard, you had the state level making that demand, teachers at different school board meetings saying they didn't feel safe going into school buildings, whereas childcare workers really don't have that organized union to advocate for those workplace conditions. I'm wondering, how do you think that influences the difference you see when it comes to who's in that room full of kids and who is teaching through a computer from their home?
Interesting questions. And I can't say that I've talked directly with the child care facilities, but they have been willing, and I really can't tell you how many of their workers have chosen not to be a part of this movement in the last 6 months. With the teachers, I think they are asking questions. I think they are asking for assurances. I'm looking, for example, I sent something out yesterday checking on the ventilation systems, but the questions that are being posed are being addressed, and through finding out what the facts are and what the precautions that need to be taken are, and are they being followed? I think that's where you can get the security that we need to have with all of our staff members to re-enter what used to be our normal schooling situation. So we'll work our way through that. There are diligent attempts to assure that, for example, hand sanitizers are available, and students, as I mentioned, are staying 6 feet apart, and all the things that you can possibly do to work with larger groups are being thought through and then enacted by those who are creating the school situation for the fall. So part of the request, I believe, was to assure that teachers had time to prepare, but also that schools had time to prepare for creating an environment that did abide by all the precautionary steps that we've heard laid out. And we work daily with the Division of Public Health. In fact, all of our school districts have a direct liaison, a direct DPH liaison that they are constantly conversing with. So we are moving forward with the safest environment that can be created.
With that goal of a lot of the districts shooting for the 6 weeks in, making the transition to a hybrid model instead of fully virtual, what are some of the concerns as far as the safety of that timing, like whether or not a second wave of COVID-19 could hit around then, or flu season that'll be reaching its peak? What are some concerns both at the state level and then anything you've been hearing from the school districts?
I'll approach it from the statistical standpoint. We have constantly watched the statistics. We have certain metrics that tell us when things are rising or falling. Our statistics have been good in Delaware, particularly compared to other states recently. And we know those tipping points, as they would say. So we're watching the statistics very carefully. All of our schools, I think, are prepared to flip into, if something happened and we had a tremendous surge of cases, a spike, as we call it, they can go into the other, a totally remote situation. We also, make sure that those students who would not be safe, there are going to be some that shouldn't be around others. But we've had flu season forever. We've had, other types of things that run through schools. So watching the statistics, keeping in constant contact with the Division of Public Health, trying to creatively figure out how to do such things as have senior celebrations. We at first couldn't have graduations, and then we creatively figured out how to do that in a safe manner. And many of our schools in Delaware were able to finally have some kind of senior celebration. So there's a constant thought process going on, and how can we do this and do it safely to preserve some of those things that are so meaningful to our students, to create, in this case, learning environments that are safe, but watching the statistics and being able to pivot if we need to. So I think, as I mentioned, we are so much better prepared for what comes next, so that we can make those decisions if necessary.
Mm-hmm. And before we went live, we were talking a bit about what you've been seeing in those schools that are going to be open for a hybrid model. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been seeing in the buildings that are prepping to open?
I was very excited to visit two schools yesterday, to see the way they had arranged their entire environment to assure that students were safely distanced. You could see, depending on the age level of the students, dramatic signs on floors, for example, in hallways as to where you were to walk, how far apart you needed to be from the next student. The classrooms were set up so that the 6 feet between student requirement was there. And remember, you can have a 3-foot situation. So there is a slight relaxation from the DPH, from the Division of Public Health, on that distancing piece. They had stripped out their classrooms, so there was very little extra stuff to be involved, but their classrooms were set up for 10 to 12 students, for example, and that allowed them to be carefully placed. They had very inviting classroom walls. It looked like they were excited about coming back to school and meeting with their students. Naturally, masks are required, and they have redone cafeterias where you might have large groups, for example, and scheduled so that you don't have more than a certain number, but always keeping that distancing between the students. Schedules have been rearranged. Specials such as art and music have been thought through, and how do you accomplish those without getting students too close together. And so it's an opportunity for us to see how these ideas work. Teachers were extremely enthusiastic and ready. They were ready to be teachers both in person, and then they are going to have to also do the remote part, because in the case of the school where I visited yesterday, you're either an A or a B, so you come Monday, Tuesday, and then you do not come Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You would be remote, or vice versa. You might be a Thursday, Friday child and have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday as a remote learning opportunity. Wednesday in that school was a cleaning day. So districts are able to decide on their model that they're going to enact. I'm going to a school next week that will open on the 16th, where you are an A or a B, but you come for a full week, and then you're off the next week and do remote learning the second week, and vice versa. So each district has chosen its own model, and we are going to see what works. And the more successes that we can find, I think you'll find more districts coming on board with greater numbers of students. In many cases, there's that, let's start with many, try the things that we've put into place, make some adjustments if we need to, and then add to our student body as we know that this is secure. Now we can add a little bit and add a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Are you seeing that with the schools doing a hybrid opening, has it been easier for the smaller districts to logistically work that out? Because it seems like a lot of the districts with larger student populations are the ones who have said, let's stick with a virtual start for now so we can plan everything out. But as far as what I've seen, the schools that are doing a hybrid start seem to have smaller student populations. Is that something that you've noticed?
Not necessarily. Indian River, for example, is a large district, and it covers 365 square miles, but they are bringing in pre-Ks, pre-kindergartners, kindergartners, and first graders, and then they will roll that up. So they have a large territory to cover and many schools, but that is their plan that they're going to begin with on the 17th. So your three larger districts, other than above Indian River, are in the northern part of the state, and they've chosen to go remote. But we need to try and see what works, and then let that news spread. Cape Henlopen is also opening on the 16th, and they're a fairly good-sized district. So it depends on the community and the school as much as the size.
How often have you been hearing from parents, and what are some of the main things that they're asking you about?
I hear from parents a lot, and it's a mixed bag. There are some that are begging us, please bring my child back to school, and accenting things that happen at school in addition to just the academic growth that is being made for students. The social and emotional programs that we have, the supports, the opportunity to interact, the opportunity to participate in band and things of that sort. So Recently, the athletic question has come up. But then I also hear from parents who still have concerns and are very appreciative of school districts opening a little later and seeing how this set of statistics, the metrics that I mentioned, are playing out and whether we stay at a low level. And they like that assurance that we're watching so that if something does occur and our numbers begin to increase very suddenly, that we're prepared to do whatever we need to do in that respect as well. So it's truly a mixed set of reactions from parents, and it will vary depending on the location. As you see, some districts are going to open with in-person services, but there's always that choice to have that remote option. Mm-hmm. That's what a hybrid would involve, some in person and some remote.
And just to clarify for readers, it's correct that districts are offering a fully remote option for students who are concerned about their health or their parents' health. That seems to be across the board.
At this point, that is a plan for, yes, that is an option.
Mm-hmm. So why don't we take a reader question? We have people asking about students who need extra learning support, which a lot of times when kids are in buildings, those kids are taken into small groups or a specialist will come and work with them. So I see people are wondering, typically those students move around the building and that could put them in contact with more people and put them at greater risk for contracting COVID-19. I'm wondering what kind of precautions have you been seeing or different tactics have you seen for schools trying to meet those students' needs, but not wanting to put anyone at any additional risk?
I'd like to first accent the fact that we are trying to assure that our teachers, our educators, our staff as a whole is healthy. Teachers have been tested. There were at-home tests that they have completed. They will be tested once a month as we go through the school year. So a quarter of the staff will be tested each week, and it just continues to roll through. So it's not a one-time check on the health of the teachers. In many cases, the teacher will move to the students to reduce the amount of movement that students would be making. So that's another thing that's in place. But I often have the opportunity to share with parents that our entire staff is working. So the people who have been on staff to provide additional support, be that a reading interventionist, a school psychologist, a mental health worker, a social worker, anyone who has that assignment of being the extra help, these are all coming back to work. When we open, we will have that full staff. So they very creatively are figuring out how to offer the extra support remotely as well as if they are in the buildings with students. We have a variety of services that we offer to our students, from feeding them to giving them the social and emotional support, in addition to the academic supports that they need. So our staff members are ready for a school year and will be delivering services to the very best of their ability.
Mm-hmm. So kind of related to staffing, in last month's State Board of Education meeting, Kevin Fitzgerald, the superintendent in Cesar Rodney, said that the state has, unofficial numbers at least, just over 200 teaching vacancies and about 400 retirements. Although it's not clear whether or not those retirements were related to COVID, it's still a pretty big number. I'm wondering, when we're talking so much about how important staffing is, and staffing challenges seem to be around like every school year, how does that, having those staffing challenges this year, how does that add in any more difficulty when it comes to getting kids in the classroom, facilitating online learning? How is that kind of throwing another wrench in all these things?
It's an interesting question because we don't know how many of those might be related to our situation. Or more
so the vacancies, I guess, is what we could focus on rather than.
Okay. I don't have a count as of today, but early in August, that's even mid-August, that is not unusual. We're still hiring. In fact, having been a superintendent for a long time, it's amazing how many people over Labor Day weekend are just coming on board. So we certainly can take a temperature check on the number of staff members, but I'm not hearing from superintendents that is the big concern right now. So remember too that if you are teaching remotely, you can teach more students because your lessons are going out, and there are places. I have a friend who is the Secretary of Education in Alaska. And there, everything is done remotely, and it's amazing how you can reach out to a broader audience. But I will ask superintendents. In fact, their meeting is right after we finish our Facebook Live this morning to see where we are. But that has not been something that they have been reporting to us is a grave concern as of today. Mm-hmm. And yet, typically in a year, we continue to hire as September approaches.
Mm-hmm. So a couple of days out from that main first day of school for the bulk of the districts, what are the biggest concerns that you're hearing from the superintendents?
Ironically, this week's big concern is about athletics, just because that has been something that's come to our attention. Things have changed. And we have learned in the last 6 months that things do change, and we take each step as we need to. It's been really warming to see how adaptable our superintendents, our principals, our staff members have been. And we have, we laughingly say we roll with the punches. We've had to, because things do change dramatically, day by day, week by week. Look back on March the 13th. Their concerns, I think, revolve around launching the school year. Mm-hmm. This is a new experience. And so we know that there are going to be some things, no matter what model you have chosen to put in place as September begins and we have a new school year in front of us, we're going to have to make some adjustments. I think as educators, though, we always have to make some adjustments based on a variety of things. This year, we just have a few more tweaks that we might have to make. And we have very adept people who are working their hardest. And believe me, they have spent innumerable hours preparing for this school year. But they know that there'll be some things that they have to adjust slightly, and they're very willing to do that.
Mm-hmm. We have a quick reader question about USDA changes to lunch programs and whether that will affect Delaware students. I'm not fully up to speed on the latest change just because things change so often. But I'm wondering, are there any major changes to lunches that people should know about?
I have good news in this respect. If you had had this conversation with me 2 days ago, I would have told you that we had to drop back from having what we call a summer feeding program where we can extend our nutritional services to a broader audience. And then usually in a school year, we are able to feed the students who meet certain qualifications. But just yesterday or late the evening before, we received a waiver so that we now know that we can continue with that broader community service. We're really excited about that. Because we have children who are going to be in schools that need to be fed, and we have students that are not going to be with us on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So that was an exciting development that has happened in the last 48 hours, one we were really hoping for.
Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing there's still no notification as far as standardized tests this year. That's something that the federal government hasn't said anything about.
You are correct. To date, there has been no appetite from the U.S. Department of Education that they will accept or even make it possible for people to ask for waivers. Mm-hmm. That's something that we'll have to wait to see how the year progresses.
Yeah. And like you've said before, the state would still want to do some sort of assessment to kind of figure out where kids are at right now as far as learning goes.
Yes, I think we're going to have some measure of where our students are functioning. Mm-hmm. We use testing for a variety of purposes, and we can best help students if we know exactly where they are in their learning walk. We can directly address shortcomings, and we can lighten up on something that they know and are already able to do. But right now we are a little more operating in the dark than usual, And there will be some informal ways to assess where students are at the beginning of the year, but nothing that is statewide. And we did not have that measure at the end of last year, which puts us in a rather nebulous position right now, but we'll figure it out.
So almost wrapping it up. Yesterday in Wilmington, Joe Biden gave a speech where he said that he would fully authorize FEMA and federal disaster relief funding to help schools pay for things like PPE, updated HVAC systems, hiring any more teachers. So I'm curious, if Delaware were to receive more money from the federal government, what would be the first most important thing that you would put that money towards?
It would depend on whether that money comes directly to the districts, whether it comes to the state as a whole.
Let's assume the state for this question.
State being the state, though, or state being the Department of if it came directly to us, and I doubt that it would, the typical thing is that it goes directly out to districts. I think districts, depending on how long the pandemic continues, may at some point need to invest in more PPE. We have a good supply right now, but that supply won't last forever. So depending on what would be there, I would suspect that if there were vaccinations, if there's some way to assure that we're safer and they come up with a way to prevent students from getting it, that might be an option that some of our districts would pursue. I do believe that we will continue to invest in the kinds of disposable things, hand sanitizers, the cleaning provisions. And we do have buildings with older HVAC systems. So some districts may say, I need to invest more in that kind of thing. They will have to eventually replace devices, though we've worked hard to make sure that each of our students has a device, and not just one per household. If there are 4 or 5 students, you need one per student. So we're working hard for that kind of thing. And we don't have everyone connected as far as the internet accessibility. We still have work to do there, although we've made tremendous progress. So I think a wide variety of things that we already are doing, but we'll need to continue to do, or we will need to refresh, like the PPE situation.
Related to PPE and cleaning supplies, actually, have you heard any concerns about, what happens if every district runs out at the same time and is ordering at the same time? Like, is there a supply chain concern for a couple weeks into the fall?
I think we're well equipped. And I talked yesterday to someone in a district who is responsible for that type of thing. He has been planning ahead since early July to make sure that he is ordering and he's thinking ahead, and he will continue to do that. So we have people who are planners, and they're trying to do their best to secure the equipment and particularly the cleaning supplies and so forth that they need. Now, they won't last forever, and there could be an eventual time when it does become more and more difficult to get certain things. But we're ready for the school year to start, and hopefully as we roll on. And remember, some of our students will long-term choose to probably do the remote option. So we'll have to look at where we are, for example, by mid-year, and see how many of our students are back with us and how many are still choosing remote options, and how long that might be offered district by district.
And so I guess final question to wrap it up, what do you think are the most important things that parents should know heading into the start of the school year?
I would ask that parents partner with us, ask questions, get good information before you draw some erroneous conclusions, work with the school. Do your very best as a parent to provide that learning space and the time for students to do, if they're doing remote learning, whatever they might need to do at home, but partner with us. Together, we can accomplish a lot, and we need to make sure the communication lines are frequent and frequently used and very open and two-way. So that partnership is always important, but I've never seen a year when it will be more important.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bunting, for joining us this morning. To those of you watching, we will continue our back to school coverage over the coming weeks as more and more kids head back to school. And, subscribe to DelawareOnline.com for anything coronavirus related, school related, general Delaware related that you need. All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Goodbye.